Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the second one of these calls that I have recorded. I'm still a little self-conscious about that and feeling like I should be doing some fancy intro or something, but haven't had time for that. And I think everybody's really here for the data, so we're just going to get into that. This is the first call where we're looking at data from 2025, and I have to say that the outlook is decent. So let's get into it. Um, Here is the first slide, our sort of marquee slide, so to speak. You can see here that the return volume post New Year's was really strong this year, up over 6,000 hours in a single day there. But then that was followed by a softer period, and the net of that is it pretty much washed out, and we are currently tracking at just over a half a point above last year. Um, that's still good news in that we're not dropping below the 2024 volume levels. Things have leveled out and are actually doing a little bit better. And in fact, when you look forward, we're a few days past the 15th now, and you look at what's happened in about the last week, things have actually gotten even more positive. So we're up north of 2% year over year at the moment. As long as that trend continues, we should be above for the full month, which will be a good way to start off the year. I am here. I am still working through this slide with a bar for every year. The value here, I think, in most cases is looking at multiple months and seeing what's going on. We're a little early for that to kind of come into play or come into the picture. So we're just seeing the first red bar, and it is the bars themselves are getting a little narrower as I add another year to the picture here. When we look at Part 91, and for anyone looking at this, the way we do this deck, the whole purpose of this call was during COVID, helping folks in the on-demand Part 135 industry understand what was happening during COVID. And fractional really wasn't in the mix there. So Part 91K, which is the fractional operators, is included in Part 91. We just started listing Part 91 as a contrast to the 135 market that we were really looking closely at. So just keep that in mind. We don't look at fractional separately here. And when we look at it this way, the combination of traditional Part 91 and 91K is up 3.7% year to date and month to date. Then when we look at the same chart, again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this chart yet because we don't have trend data over multiple months in the year. And here is the combined chart, which also looks similar as the first two. Obviously, we're taking all the data and just combining all Part 135 and 91 together. And here we're up about 2.5 points roughly. Now, when we get into size classes, you'll see that there's variances by size class here. The light jets are at the bottom end of the market. They tend to show any sort of softness in the market first. And also there are certain periods where trip length comes into play. Over the holidays, we see people going to ski country and going to the islands and things like that. And those favor larger, longer range aircraft. Also, the group sizes oftentimes are larger because it's extended family that kind of gets together to do a holiday or vacation together. So light jets were not as popular over this holiday period as some of the other size classes. Mids, which have had a harder time over the past year or so in terms of their popularity or where they fit in the mix. They did well over this holiday period, partly because I think it's the cabin size and range. And then super mids, which we have seen doing better than any other size class for quite some time, really broke out here, up 12.8% year to date and month to date. Large cabin did pretty well too, up 7.1%. I mean, you can see quite a spike here over the holiday. And then turboprops were also not doing so well in this period. And I think the reasons are the same as light jets. So when we come into the different markets, I like to show airline markets from time to time throughout here, and we'll show them with the airline traffic or without. Actually, a couple of them we don't bother showing GA because there's so little. But for LA, there is decent GA traffic that goes in as transient into LAX. Here is the airport with all the airline traffic, and here it is when you pull out the airlines and just show GA. There is some drop here that I think is attributable to the fire or the fires that have been out there in LA, and we see that even more clearly when we look at Van Nuys. So Van Nuys, that was right on the edge of the Palisades fire. I mean, traffic really dropped off. I mean, there was fire activity going in there, but not a lot of our business really dropped off as we got up to the halfway point in the month here. So off 22.8% year to date. And you can see the typical, normal days here. And when we look at the last few days, the volume really takes a digger. LaGuardia is one of these airline airports we look at. There is so little GA activity in here, we don't bother breaking it out, but it's kind of a good barometer for what the airlines are doing in the New York metro market, particularly what they're doing domestically. So we like to look at that from time to time, and you can see 3.9% uptick. So the airlines have added a few more frequencies there this year versus last year. Here is Teterboro. Teterboro was weaker over this period in general, not dramatically so, but several hundred flights halfway through the month, off versus the same period last year. White Plains was a different story, was up actually more than Teterboro was down. Farmingdale, which we just started adding to the deck, is also up considerably, significantly versus last year. So different stories for the different airports in the metro area. Morristown was also up. So Teterboro seems to be unique there. Part of that is, I think, the transient traffic that you would see for business purposes that goes predominantly into Teterboro because it's the easiest way to get into the city. That traffic doesn't really happen over the holiday period. And what we did see was people that lived in greater New York, these other airports like Farmingdale and White Plains and Morristown are closer to where some of the folks live. And we saw those airports up because people were traveling out on their holiday plans. So here is Chicago Midway, including airline traffic, off 0.4%. And then here it is with GA off 1.1%. So things were also a little weaker there. This airport also is the closest to the downtown business center. And we're looking at a cycle where business travel wasn't the biggest deal. And you can see similarly, the suburban airport closer to where the folks in Chicago live did have an uptick over this period, and it's up 16.8% year over year. So I think the story that we're seeing here is, there was strong leisure travel over the whole holiday period. We had a period of time where that was really heavily impacted, and we're seeing that reverse itself a little bit, which is good to see. Now here is Atlanta. This is Hartsfield, and this is including the airlines. We had a weather event here that really hit the traffic on that particular day. When we pull out the airline traffic, you can see traffic was up year over year by about 50 flights. There just aren't that many GA flights going into Hartsfield, but we like to take a look at it. And then here's Peachtree to DeKalb, also off a bit for this period. So you can see things aren't always, reflected the same way, market by market. Different markets will react in their own way. Now here is Boston for all traffic, including the airlines. And here is Boston just for GA. So we are seeing pretty strong traffic out of there. And then here is Bedford, where a slightly different story. This is a suburban airport around Boston that is actually off 6.5%. So slightly different pattern with those two airports. Now we're at another one of our airline barometer airports with Reagan National. And if LaGuardia gets a small amount of GA private traffic, Reagan gets less. We can see that they're up similarly, like less than 1%, 70 basis points here. Then when we look at Dulles, Dulles is a fairly significant GA airport. This is the airline and GA in there, up 17.7%. So quite a spike for the holiday there. Some of that's just calendar. And then also up when we look at GA by, ironically, the same 17%. We don't see that often, but you can see it's a lower number of flights, but the same year over year change. And Manassas, which is our suburban airport for the DC area that we track, was up 13.8%. So a bunch of activity going out of there. Here is Charlotte, clearly major airline hub, up 3.4%, with everything combined. And then here it is when we pull out the airlines, GA up 14.2%. So let's start looking at the second home cities. A lot of what we were looking at here were where people were coming from. Here's where they might be going to. We almost should take these slides out this time of year because, I mean, they're hidden actually behind our chart here, and it is off season for the Hamptons and a few of these other popular summer destinations. Yes, sure, it's up 19.6%, but this is only a few flights. This is off season traffic. Aspen is a different story. This is Aspen, including the airlines, and you can see they're up 33.5%, up actually even more, 45.8% when we pull out the airlines. So that just tells you how popular Aspen was, particularly over the New Year's holiday this year. Up over 500 flights. Look at that, almost cracking 50%. The other airports in the sort of the big ski destinations also did okay. I mean, they did really well. They were up double digits in most places. Here's Eagle with the airlines, and here it is without, up 13.8%, but 13 is not 45 or 48. So Aspen was the most popular ski destination in the list of cities that we track. Looking at Denver, which I wouldn't say is necessarily a second home city, but because it's close to Eagle and Vail, we tend to put them together. They're up 3.2% there. Here's Nantucket, another off-season destination. So it's interesting that it's also tracking up about 20%, but again, much lower levels of flights. Martha's Vineyard, kind of in the same ballpark, off-season, but still tracking positive territory. And then here we are in Napa, which is more of a destination all year round, and they're up 10.2%. Bandon Dunes was not super popular over the holiday, off 3.8. Scottsdale is just growing. I think it's, for years, when we look at this, it's rare to see Scottsdale not growing one way or another. Obviously, it's not at the same scale or level that we're seeing at some of the resort destinations, but a super popular place for the private jet set. Jackson Hole, here's another one with a nice spike, not the 40-something% that we had out of Aspen, but still strong. And you can see quite a spike here over the holiday. And here is Hilton Head, which has its own, it has a pattern of its own. It's obviously off season, but a material number of additional flights for this market, up 28.2%. Now we have a bucket of cities that we just lump as other cities. We start out with Dallas here. We look at a couple airports, Addison being the first one. And you can see here we're off 14.5% in Addison for the year. There just really wasn't holiday travel out of this market for whatever reason. And then here's Dallas Love. This is including the airlines. When we pull out the airlines, we're off 3.9%. So traveling in and out of Dallas over the holiday period was just not the same as some of the other markets. It is a big business destination, which is worth noting. So we're now rolling down into Florida. Opa-locka is the fastest growing South Florida airport destination. It's still not at the level of Palm Beach, but super popular, especially with the folks up in New York. Gets you close to Miami. And that's up 9.5%. Here's Fort Lauderdale International. That's including all traffic, and it's off 0.5%. When we pull out the airlines, we're up 16.7%, and we're seeing that holiday spike having an impact. Fort Lauderdale Exec, smaller spike, tends to be a little more of the local market. So folks flying into Lauderdale International are more likely to be transient, and folks at Exec tend to be more likely to be based, at least from my experience. And that traffic there was off a bit. The folks that were already in Florida didn't feel like they needed to leave over the holidays. People came to them. Here is Naples on the West Coast, and that is a destination for sure this time of year. And you can see we're seeing that holiday spike. West Palm, this is the last airport that we look at in the deck, and we can see here that including all the traffic was up 6.7%, pulling out the airlines up 6.5%. And it is worth noting, look at the flight count here compared to any of those other ones we were looking at. This really is the private aviation mecca airport for South Florida. There are more private aviation flights here than any other, and by a significant margin. So that's the airport group. I'm now going to bounce. Oh, pardon me. I did add Nassau recently, and I just didn't have that in my head. So 8.4%. Warm weather destinations. If we pulled Mexico and the Caribbean, you would see a lot of this. People wanted to go either to ski country or they wanted to go to the Bahamas or the Caribbean or Mexico. So all of those destination locations had the holiday spike that you're seeing here, and Nassau was no exception. So now I'm going to just skip ahead to the most recent on the top 50 route stuff. What I'll point out for anyone that hasn't been on these calls, or I guess listened to these recordings now that we're doing these, I will point out that the total flight frequency in our market surprises some folks. That, we're looking at, this is a 2-week period, and the number of flights between West Palm and Teterboro, most popular destination in the country for private flying, was 33. Now, granted, we have flights that are also going to Opa-locka in both directions. So you can see when you add those together, now we're up to, 63 flights if we're going that direction from New York. But it's not hundreds. So some folks are surprised by that. The private aviation is unique, and a lot of it is going where you want to go, when you want to go. So the actual concentration on specific OD pairs isn't as great as some people may think. But what is clear is that we are in the season for the north-south traffic pattern. You won't see this in the summer. This time of year, the traffic between New York and the South Florida airports is very strong. And then we're seeing some international here, the Bahamas and Caribbean, where we have to get down to number 10 on the list before we get to anything transcontinental. This is Van Nuys to Teterboro. Part of that makes sense because that tends to be more of a business OD pair, not so big on the holiday periods. And it's also interesting to note that Las Vegas to Van Nuys, which if you look at the entire year, Las Vegas, Van Nuys, and the return route are the most frequently flown. Part of that is they're not that expensive, and the other thing is there's just something about flying privately between those two pairs that is attractive to people. So though that typically has them near the top, not during the peak period here where the north-south East Coast travel takes over. But you'll note that getting out of Vegas back to the West Coast was popular because of the holiday. People were already there. If you go the other direction, people leaving LA going to Vegas, you have to come all the way to number 27 to see that. And this is unusual. Normally you'd see it up in the top 10. So those are the things I would point out in this top 50. Nothing overly surprising. It's just that's the pattern that tends to reveal itself over this particular holiday period. And then we'll jump into fuel. So this is the slide from the last period, or actually through the mid-month of December. We look at what we're looking at now, which is the last couple weeks. Prices have gone up. They've gone up for a couple weeks back to back, with the exception of Alaska and Hawaii, where they've gone down a little bit. We are seeing rates go up in Kansas more than anywhere else. But overall prices in Kansas are actually not that bad. So the light color is cheaper, darker is more expensive here. Colorado stands out as being one of the most expensive places to buy gas in the middle of the country. Rhode Island takes the cake on the East Coast. And then, of course, Alaska and Hawaii are harder places to get fuel. So they're also up there. I would say if we look like macro over time, the prices are better now than they have been, several months ago. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody. So the prices have come down overall. They do fluctuate sort of up and down on a week over week basis. So that is it for this deck. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll be working to make this, now that I have made the commitment to record these things, it puts a little more pressure on me to, to polish it and whatnot. So we'll see what I can do there over the course of the year. But hope you find this helpful, and we'll have another one of these in another 2 weeks where we will wrap up the full month of January. Until then, blue skies and tailwinds.